Good morning, all. It is that time. Time for our read aloud of the first rule of punk. Um, we're really close to the end, guys. There's about 18 pages left, about 4 chapters. So what I'm going to do is you'll notice that yesterday's read aloud had 2 chapters because they're really short. And it's going to be the same thing with today and tomorrow. I'm going to read chapters 36 and 37 for this read aloud. Then tomorrow is going to be 38 and 39. And then you're going to share your first rule of punk reader's response journal with me so I can give you credit for a reading grade. And we're going to have a little project for it too. So chapters 36 and 37 today. Chapter 36. This definitely wasn't Mrs. Hidalgo's first time setting up a DIY show. She was a pro. We didn't have a stage, but we had power. With Mr. Baca's help, she found a spot for us outside the school near one of the cafeteria exits. She and Joe unloaded the drum kit from the Hidalgo's basement. Mr. Baca connected extension cords into electrical outlets inside the cafeteria that Mrs. Hidalgo ran out to where we were setting up. Whatever happens, Mr. Baca said it was conspiratorially, I was never here. He winked and disappeared inside the cafeteria. As long as they don't decide to pull the plug, we're good, Mrs. Hidalgo said. I tried not to think about throwing up as I watched people start to come out of the auditorium. The talent show must have just ended. You okay, Malu? Mrs. Hidalgo came over and handed me a water bottle. It's going to be fine, I repeated in my head as I gulped. I wiped my mouth and shook off my nerves. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. It's okay to feel anxious, Mrs. Hidalgo said. Anyone would be. In the distance, I could see Principal Rivera by the school's entrance. She wore jeans, which almost made her look like a regular person. What do you think she's going to do? I asked, knowing it wasn't punk to worry about Principal Rivera's reaction, and feeling embarrassed. Well, you don't have to do it, Mrs. Hidalgo said. I looked over at Ellie and Joe, who were fiddling with their instruments. Benny silently played the notes of the song on the buttons of his trumpet. Maybe you should think about why you wanted to do this, and then decide, Mrs. Hidalgo said. I'm going to set up the mics, just in case. She patted my arm. Oh, almost forgot, Mrs. Hidalgo turned back and dug around her bag. Hope you got a CD player, not just a Walkman. She handed me a square envelope. Thanks, I said. Inside the envelope was a CD and a playlist. I sat down on the curb and thought about why we planned the alternative talent show. Because Principal Rivera excluded us from the Fall Fiesta talent show for being too loud, not being good enough for the anniversary show. I thought about it more, and I knew there were other reasons. Reasons that involved Mom and feeling like I could never be who she wanted me to be. Oz tells the cowardly lion that real courage is facing danger when you are afraid. I was afraid. No, I was terrified. But the talent show and the song were my idea, and I couldn't back out now. Suddenly the feelings of uncertainty about doing the show disappeared, like someone had taken an eraser to writing on a chalkboard. I walked to where the rest of the band waited by the drum kit. Ellie sat behind, ready to rock. Ready, Freddie? Joe asked. He bounced around, shaking his shoulder like a boxer getting ready for a match. I chewed on my nails and wished I had my headphones to drown out the sounds around me. No, I said, but let's do this. Here we go, Joe said. The Coco's on 3. The 4 of us piled our hands together. Mine wasn't the only clammy one. 1, 2, 3, we said in unison. The Cocos! Hands together, hands apart. I silently wished for the confidence of all my favorite punk sinkers, and even of Lola B, to get me through the performance. Chapter 37. I walked up to the microphone stand Mrs. Hidalgo... I'll restart that one. I walked up to the microphone stand Mrs. Hidalgo had set up for me and tapped it. The sound echoed around the parking lot. Hello, Posada Middle School, I said hesitantly. Some kids had come over while we were setting up. Other kids and adults started to trickle in to see what was going on. So, we're the Cocos, I said. We tried out for the Fall Fiesta talent show, but we didn't get in because we were terrible. People laughed, and I felt myself relax a little. Actually, we didn't get in because we were too loud, and because we played a punk rock song. And punk apparently has nothing to do with this celebration of Posada, the school, or the person. Someone in the crowd booed, but not at us. I think he was booing for us. But you know what? I said, my voice getting louder. Jose Guadalupe Posada was totally punk. I saw Mr. Baca in the crowd making the rock and roll sign with his hand. Principal Rivera said Posada represented Mexican people and culture. But what she didn't tell you is that he represented all people, especially the ones who needed a voice and a way to be heard. There was a murmur in the crowd. I looked at Mrs. Hidalgo, who smiled at me and nodded. Senora Oralia stood next to her. She smiled too. I read a book about him that I got from our school library, and I learned that he criticized stuff that was wrong with the government and things that were unfair in society. And he did this through art. What's more punk than that? I asked. I looked at the faces that had gathered closely. My classmates were listening to what I had to say. Some were nodding in agreement. So we're doing the Alterna Fiesta talent show for Posada, and for us, and for anyone else who got left out of the talent show because they didn't fit in. Anyone who wants to perform can come up after our set. Everyone gets a voice here, no matter how weird or loud or untraditional you are. I took a big gulp of air and looked over at Joe. We're the Cocos, Joe said into his microphone as we'd planned. And this is not your abuela's music! Ellie struck her drumsticks together to count us off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Benny played the opening notes of the traditional song, and the four of us sang a slow, bellowing chorus. We did our best to imitate the mournful-sounding ranchera singing we listened to at Calaca. And then we launched into the fastest and loudest rendition of Cielito Lindo anyone at Posada Middle School, and probably the world, had ever heard. When it was my turn to sing alone, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath as if I were preparing to jump into the deepest end of a swimming pool. As I sang, I kept my eyes closed, too afraid to see the faces looking back at me. Every nerve in my body was alive and buzzing. I imagined I was Lola B singing to a sold-out stadium. I pictured Selena in the audience, her jaw on the floor. Joe, Ellie, and Benny joined me for the chorus, which says that singing makes a sad heart happy. And I knew it was true, because any sadness I felt about leaving home or about Selena and Mom didn't exist in the moment. Hearing the band sing together always made me want to giggle, so I did. Getting a good laugh out made me feel more at ease. I sang, clutching the microphone so hard my hand hurt. When I finally got the nerves to open my eyes, I looked into the crowd of Posada kids, teachers, and families that had gathered. I spotted familiar faces. Senora Asensio, Selena and Diana, Mr. Jackson, and Principal Rivera. She had a confused look on her face, like she didn't know what to make of us or the situation. Then I saw familiar faces that I didn't expect to see. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. When I looked back to where Mrs. Hidalgo and Senora Aurelio were, they'd been joined by Mom and Dad? Mom's lips moved, singing along with the words like we were singing together. Maybe this was the best way to share my secret project with her after all. I'm going to start crying. Someone in the audience let out a loud mariachi cry, and Joe replied with his own. Ellie's hands were a blur as she banged the drums so hard, her red mane flailing like flames all around her. Benny swung his trumpet from left to right, his ponytail flowing along. With that, I shed the last of my nervousness like a snake's skin. For the rest of our performance, I pogoed and twirled, and the lyrics didn't stumble awkwardly out of my mouth like they sometimes did when I spoke Spanish. They flowed like they had always been a part of me. I looked in Mom's direction. What did she think as we turned Cielito Lindo upside down? She caught my eye and smiled. It's beautiful. Really. My eyes are wet from tears. When the band played the final note of the song, I took off my mariachi hat and, like Selena with her candy necklace, tossed it into the crowd. I realized it probably wasn't the best idea because this hat was about 50 times bigger and heavy, way heavier than a candy necklace. The saucer-like hat soared over the student body. Kids grabbed at it until an 8th grader emerged with it on his head. We got a loud round of applause and a whooping from the crowd, and as we practiced, we held hands and took a group bow. And even though there was no stage to dive off, Joe stood on one of our little amps and leaped into the crowd, where he was caught by some of Selena's candy crew. Maybe Joe was punk after all. Stage dive! Wow. You know what? This book has subverted my predictions. Because I thought that Malu and her mom would... I thought that there might be a thing where they might come together because of it. But I thought that Mom might be furious when she found out. But it turns out Mom's okay. Touching. Anyway, guys, check out the responses for these couple of chapters, and tomorrow the last 2 for the first rule of punk. Have a great day, guys.